Hello everyone, welcome back to the podcast. Today, Toby and I are going to be discussing several Premier League clubs who are struggling at the moment and trying to figure out how they should go about fixing the issues that they have. Toby, which teams are we going to be discussing today?
Yeah, there's a few on our agenda to really try and tackle today. We're looking at the bottom two in Aston Villa and Wolves, who have had very, very disappointing starts to the season so far. We're going to be touching on one of the newly promoted sides in Leeds, who have really struggled in front of goal, especially, as well as Forest and West Ham, who again also having disappointing seasons, especially Forest, considering how well they performed last season and maybe seeing a drop off so far this season. And the first one we are going to touch on, and possibly the biggest one, and the one that I'm sure everybody is talking about the most and will be talking about the most, is Manchester United, isn't it, Mev?
Yes, absolutely. 14th place currently in the Premier League table after 4 games. 1 win, 1 draw, 2 losses, just 4 goals scored, an additional 2 if you include own goals, and 7 conceded on the back of losing 3-0 in the Manchester derby, which was a very lackluster performance. I think maybe you can make the argument that the last 20 minutes or maybe even 30 minutes were really good. But at that point, Man United were already 2-0 or 3-0 down. So it doesn't really count for much. In terms of the first half and maybe the first 60 minutes of the game, I don't think Man United were that good. Is that much of a surprise for you, mate?
I don't know. They weren't good, but they also weren't awful. I feel like they were kind of somewhere in the middle. And I think maybe going into the game, I would have expected maybe them to be one end or the other. I thought with it maybe being a Manchester derby and how they have performed in recent Manchester derbies, that they would have maybe had a little bit more fight in them and played a little better. Or Manchester City would have come out and absolutely wiped them, because Manchester City, when they have been firing this season, especially Erling Haaland, have been really, really strong. And I think it was kind of somewhere in the middle. I think going forward, I still think they were okay, and I think they did create some chances in this game. It just felt like defensively, and especially in this game as it has been all season, it was just too easy for Manchester City. It wasn't like it was particularly difficult for them to break United down. Looking at sort of Doku and Foden and Haaland, I think were really good, but Manchester City as a whole, I don't think really had much to sort of compete against in Man United's defence, especially in that first half. It just felt very easy for them.
It definitely was really easy for them, and maybe that's what we should be focusing on. The fact that perhaps Man City were only in second or third gear and didn't really have to work too hard to be Manchester United. I think the thing for me, and I think the thing that a lot of people are discussing at the moment, is Man United's midfield. Is the two, regardless of whatever two it is, whether it's Casemiro, whether it's Ugarte, Bruno Fernandes, Kobe Mainu, is that two working in the Premier League where teams are overloading the midfield? They start off maybe with three, they maybe invert a fullback, maybe a centre back, someone the striker drops deep. Can Man United really compete and get a stranglehold of a game with only two in midfield, especially when they're asked to do so much? And for me, I think the answer is no. I think they need to try and find a way, because if you think about it against Manchester City, and it's not just City are a quality side with quality players, but it's in every game arguably this season that, they're coming up against a three in the opposition, and then the two midfielders for Manchester United are just so, they lack the legs, and then they're spread so thin. I mean, they're starting off on one side, or maybe the right, and then the other opposition switches the play, and then they all have to sprint over to the left, but they never get there quickly enough. So they're never really in control of any game of football unless it is end to end, in which the midfield just becomes, it's just there and not very necessary in terms of structure pattern of play. So for me, I'm looking at the midfield and I'm thinking to myself, maybe Amram needs to change something with the midfield. Maybe needs to drop the two number 10s a little bit deeper. Maybe one of the centre backs need to push on into the midfield. But at the moment, for me, regardless of who it is, Man City or not, with the midfielders they have or not, they're just getting overrun, and I think that's an issue that they really need to address. Is that something that you've noticed as well, or do you think maybe they've got some wider issues, perhaps?
No, yeah, I think it definitely is a structural issue for Man United. I mean, when you look at their numbers, their defensive numbers in terms of actions, tackles, and interceptions are actually all quite good, and there's not really any sort of glaring spots in those numbers in where things are going wrong. And especially in that sort of attacking third, they are winning that ball when they do. They win it high, they win it well, they win it quickly. And there's no issue there in terms of pressing from the front. But as you said, I think once it gets to that midfield, and further into that defensive unit, there are structural issues. Maybe the wing backs, obviously the structure that Amram has, the wing backs are so attacking. They're not there to support those defenders, and you're ending up with situations where you have wingers, and when it is Manchester City and those wingers are world class, going up against your sort of outside centre backs not being supported by those wing backs, and I definitely think that has caused some issues for Man United. And it's whether, I suppose, going forward, like you said, one of those 10s dropping back, maybe dropping that pressing intensity. Does Amrin want to sacrifice that and their attacking play to try and bolster that defence at all? Will he do it? I'm not sure. I don't know, but it should be something that they should be looking at for sure.
Well, I don't even think he necessarily has to sacrifice anything. I think he needs to just adapt, because I'm looking at the side and people are talking about, is the 3-4-3 system, is it working, is it not? I don't see a fully functioning system. I see players who are rigid in their formation in the 3-4-3, but there's not enough rotations. The chemistry between the players isn't quite evident to see. Are they making runs together? Are they finding passes? It's not quite coherent enough, considering the fact that he's been in the job for almost a year now, to really, for me, call it a system. I think perhaps the Man United players are getting so much information about what they should do in specific situations in this 3-4-3 that maybe it's overwhelming them. Maybe they're just not taking that information in, and when they're forcing to have to make a decision when they come up against an opposition, they're overthinking it, and then therefore they're too slow to react to it as well, and that's probably happening all over the pitch. For me, though, I think I slightly disagree on the pressing point, because I think that forward line presses all right. I won't say well, I won't say poorly. I think it's just all right. But the issue is, if an opposition team beats that first layer of press, then you've only got the two midfielders when they've overloaded that midfield, and then therefore the midfielders have a decision to make there. Do they just sit back and let them run at them and try and slow them down, and then you've got the two midfielders and the three behind them? Or sometimes they go as well and they jump forward, but then if the pass is a really good one, remember you've got loads of great ball playing defenders in the Premier League, sometimes you can bypass the midfield as well, and then the opposition just running on that defence. So I think it's an okay press so far from the front, but it's not coherent. Not everyone is jumping, and not everyone is deciding to go together. Now, either they all press together or they all sit back, and they're not doing that at the moment, and therefore they're getting found out. And for me, it's not quite working so far. But what Amram's going to have to do about that? Well, he's going to have to do something, because 4 points from 4 games, and with Chelsea up next, it's going to be difficult for them to get even more points going forward.
Yeah, and I think when teams are getting into the dangerous areas against Manchester United, once they have beaten that poor defensive structure, as we said, one sort of clear weakness that at least Amram has maybe tried to patch is their goalkeeping situation so far. They've obviously signed Lemens at the end of the window, who's yet to come into the side. But statistically, yeah, they have been one of the poorest performing sides in the league in terms of goalkeeping. 53% save percentage, which is 17th in the league, and minus 0.6 post-shot expected goals, which puts them 14th in the league. Because their expected goals against, they're sort of around 14th, 15th in the league, which, yeah, isn't great. Still, they are conceding a lot of chances. But I think with that shot stopping on top as well, it's just making their defence even worse. And combined, conceding 7 goals from 4 games for a side of Man United, it's too much so far, really.
And that's the thing, because even if Lemens comes into goal, I'm thinking about the fixtures. I mean, Chelsea will be tough. The one after that is Brentford, and we saw on the weekend, Brentford versus Chelsea, the amount of long throws that Brentford put in the box that even Chelsea was struggling with. So you put a new goalkeeper from a new league, despite the fact that all of his underlying numbers and stats look really good from the Belgian league. How is that going to translate? He's still very young. Obviously, the pressure of playing for Manchester United, that's going to be intense as well. Do you put him into that game? And if you don't put him in that game, do you put him against Sunderland? And it's going to be, there's a lot of big decisions that Amram has to make between now and the next 5 or 6 games to make sure that he turns the fortune of Manchester United and get them to winning games and getting points. But we've talked a lot about the negatives, and I just want to ask, in terms of context, are we potentially being too harsh just because of the fact that they've played Arsenal, one of the best sides in the league. They play Manchester City, one of the best sides in the league. They beat Burnley at home, a team they should have done. Arguably, they should have beaten Fulham away from home, considering who Man United are and where they want to be. But just to play devil's advocate, do you think that potentially we're being too harsh, or is it more about the performances as well as the results?
I don't think it's being too harsh because this is something that I think we would have brought up and I certainly wanted to bring up anyways, is that going forward, Man United have been pretty good. They've been one of the best teams in the league going forward statistically. Anyway, in terms of chance creation, they've got an XG of nearly 8.5, which puts them second in the league, only behind Chelsea, I believe. And as you said, towards the end of that City game, they made some good chances. Burnley, they had a number of chances. Could have been 4, 5, 6 in that game, even potentially. Fulham, they should have won. And Arsenal, again, I think they played really, really well going forward, and they dominated that game in an attacking sense. In terms of chance creation, as I said, really, really good. Where they are struggling is putting that ball in the back of the net. They are the biggest underperformers in terms of XG to the goals that they have scored. Only scoring 4 goals and underperforming their XG by 4.5 already is massive. I think last season the biggest underperformers was around 13. So to have 4 already in the first 4 games is crazy. And yeah, it's just some more stats in terms of their shot. 0.01 goals per shot they're on so far in the league, which puts them 18th, and 0.06 goal per shot on target, which is also 18th in the league. So I think if they can start putting the ball in the back of the net, and maybe that's where they are lacking that player to do that with Cooney now injured. Sesko obviously coming into the side, maybe needs one just to get that confidence and start racking them in. And maybe they're looking a little bit too much at players like Mbeumo and Fernandes. The only 2 goal scorers for them this season to do that. And I think once they start scoring, they will be better. But can they rely on that attack to sort of make up for where they're lacking defensively?
Well, to be honest, mate, they're going to have to, because think about the areas that they decided to strengthen over the summer in the transfer window. It was Mbeumo, it was Sesko, it was Cunha, and then who else did they sign? They signed Lemens, they signed Diego Leon to be a backup left wing back. So 3 of their 5 signings and 3 of the more established signings and the most money, they were all in the forward areas. And with Bruno Fernandes playing deeper, hopefully trying to orchestrate the attack, which isn't quite working out at the moment, in my opinion. They should be scoring more goals, even though they're underperforming. And that's how they're going to try and go about winning games. They were struggling in their attack last season with Højlund and Xerxes. They signed Sesko. I think he's still, very young, very raw, getting used to the Premier League and the intensity and the physicality. So you need to give him time. But to be fair, at the same time, how is he ever going to score enough goals to justify the price tag if you're only going to give him one shot in the Manchester Derby with an XG of 0.03? That is just not enough service to him. And when we think about maybe Højlund, the things that he was lacking last season when he was playing for United were the fact that he just unable to get any shots away because you're just not getting any chances and the team behind him weren't creating them. And so you've got to try and figure out about maybe it's a system thing, maybe it's a tactical thing. The thing is, Man United strikers have been struggling for years and years and years now. I mean, there's that crazy stat that the last person to score 20 league goals for Man United was Robin van Persie. That was a decade ago. Things in terms of forwards for Man United and scoring goals is incredibly difficult. And is it going to change? Well, something's going to have to. And maybe we should start talking about that. How on earth is Ruben Amorim going to try and go about fixing this Man United side so they can score more goals, win more games? Because ultimately, especially fan media, people are coming for him already. The record of only 31 points from 30 games in the Premier League is not one that is encouraging. And so let's talk about it. How is he going to fix Man United? The $1 million question. Any idea, mate?
I mean, everybody is saying, is he going to change formation? Is he going to change system? I don't think he will, and I don't think he should. I don't think it's going... Is the system working at the moment? No. Is him playing in a system that he doesn't like? He doesn't know. The players he's signed for that system maybe don't fit a different system better. Is that going to help? Probably not. Are there tweaks to the system that need to be made? Yes, and I think you've already touched on a few really good points. I think in terms of that midfield, they need more defensive support for the three centre backs in behind them. I think maybe he needs to be a little bit more conservative in terms of his wing backs and the press, and allowing a better rest defense and support for the defense as a whole. And maybe at the moment his game is relying on controlling that ball in the final third and winning it high, when ultimately now in the Premier League, and maybe that is the difference, that you can far easily be punished by any team in the league. I mean, we saw Burnley score 2 goals who were not in that game at all, by simply having really quick transitions, countering against that Man United press and control, and maybe just being a little bit more conservative, I suppose, is a quick fix for now potentially. But as you said, the games coming up, looking at Chelsea, Brentford, and Sunderland. Chelsea's going to be a tough one, but maybe those Brentford and Sunderland games are games where they just need to get a little bit more confidence as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. In the short term, they need to do something, because 4 points from 4 games, and if they lose the next game against Chelsea, then they play more games and got points, and that is simply not acceptable for Manchester United. I think in terms of the long run, I think maybe from between, it's not even the long run, maybe some more medium term, from now to the next transfer window, I think you have to acknowledge the fact that they're brought in good players who will bed in and will improve the side. However, it is not the perfect team, and you don't have the perfect players in every single position. So in the meanwhile, you may have to make it work. I think tactically, when they play out from a goal kick, the left centre back and right centre back are to the left and right of the goalkeeper, but the central defender is in some sort of a diamond formation, so he's in front of the goalkeeper. But I think, as was perfectly showed in the Manchester derby, Haaland was just pressing the goalkeeper, and then his shadow meant that De Ligt was never an option for the goalkeeper. But then also, as soon as the goalkeeper passes out to the left or right centre back, De Ligt is then pressured from a Man City player. So, do you really want De Ligt receiving the ball on the half turn to try and look and play the ball in that position? Absolutely not. That is just asking for chaos. So I think subtle tweaks in terms of how they build up, how they press, how they look to transition can definitely help Manchester United and Ruben Amorim get some more results in the short and medium term. And I think in terms of the long run, I think for me it is the midfield. I think it's almost so obvious that we're trying to think, like, is it not that? I think it has to be in the midfield. I don't think. I mean, Ugarte, Casemiro, Fernandes, Menu. I don't know what's going on. I mean, I think Man United have the players to maybe stick to a 3 at the back, if maybe that's what Amorim is so stuck to, but maybe go 3-4-1-2. Could you play Casemiro or Ugarte with Mainu alongside him and Bruno Fernandes in the midfield? Just clog up that midfield and go, you're not going to get through us. And then have a front two of Cunha and Bumo when they're both fit, and maybe Andor, Sesko and Xerxes. And then all of a sudden that looks a lot better and looks a lot more solid. And then you got Bruno Fernandes, your best player, playing in the position that will get you the most goals, provide the most assists. He'll have the biggest impact on the team. Because at the moment, your best player isn't playing in a position that's impacting the team enough in a positive way. It's like saying, let's move Mohamed Salah from right wing to left wing because we're lacking left wingers. No, you still play Mohamed Salah right wing, and then you try and have other players try and fit around him. Maybe that's a solution. I don't know. Do you think that's something he would do? I'm not sure. I'm not sure Amorim is going to change, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to be changing anytime soon. I think it's going to be if things get really desperate and he's almost forced to change. He's stuck to his guns so far, and yeah, I don't particularly see that changing. I mean, I could definitely see that system working. Having Bruno Fernandes sort of in between that midfield and attack, I think will, as you said, get a little bit more out of him attacking, but also be able to support 2 midfielders in behind him. Will Amorim do it? Probably not. But as you said, it's something needs to be done very soon.
Do you see Manchester United improving between now and Christmas in terms of results, points?
Looking at their next 5 games, they've got a bit of a mixed bag. I mean, I can see them struggling against Chelsea and Liverpool. They've got Liverpool away in 4 games' time. That Brentford and Sunderland game, I think they can go there and get good wins. I think they can get good wins in both of those games. And I think if they can do that, that's something to build on. And I still think in games where they can dominate possession and they can have really good control of the game, they can still go out and put out really, really good performances. But I think the big question mark is going to be against those much tougher opposition. Like we saw against City, it was far too easy for them in the first half. Is that going to be the case for Chelsea and Liverpool? And I think it still will be till at least Christmas. I think in those big games they are still going to struggle, and they don't have a system that really suits those big games, to be honest. So I think till Christmas it's going to be, as it has been so far this season, a bit up and down still.
Yeah, I have to agree on that. I think they will improve and get more points. I just don't want to be looking deeply for positives. I just want the positives to just be there and smack me in the face. I want them to win 3-0 and then to not have to see oh well, they won the XG battle. So yeah, I think it's going to be a situation that's going to have a lot of eyeballs and everyone's going to be watching very closely between now and the future of Manchester United in general. Let's move on then to Aston Villa, a team who are vastly underperforming this season. Aside they finished 6th in the Premier League last season, were a game away from potentially getting the Champions League. And at the moment, after 4 games, they're only on 2 points, second bottom in the table, 2 draws, 2 losses, 0 goals is the thing that most people are talking about for Aston Villa in the Premier League so far from 4 games. And that is quite disappointing. Even the teams in and around them have at least scored a single goal. So, Aston Villa, Unai Emery, what do you think is going on, mate?
Yeah, you said that maybe we were a little bit harsh starting with Man United as a team who are underperforming, but I don't think that is the case with Villa at all. They have been vastly underperforming, and going forward, they have looked like a completely different side. Not just in terms of the case it was with Man United not converting their chances, which is an issue for Aston Villa. They have an underperformance of their XG so far, almost 3. They're actually second bottom, so only second bottom to Man United. But in that instance as well, they are also struggling to even create chances. 0.07 non-penalty XG per shot, which is joint last. So the quality of the chances that they are creating is really, really low as well. And I think what makes it a lot clearer for Aston Villa is how good they've looked going forward under Unai Emery, how fluid they've been, how quick they've been, in terms of looking at Ollie Watkins and Morgan Rogers and Tielemans being such fantastic players for them last season, just seem to have not clicked so far at all this season.
Yeah, the mood around Aston Villa isn't great at the moment, and I think that also stems from the transfer window as well, which I do think is an issue. But I want to give you what my thoughts are on why they're underperforming so far in the league, and I want to let me know if you agree or not. So I think Unai Emery and Aston Villa under Unai Emery have been a great team at exploiting other teams' strengths. If they come up against a top quality side, that they can find out their strengths, nullify them, and then exploit their weaknesses really well. I think what's happening at the moment is the fact that a lot of other teams are now giving Aston Villa respect because they realize that they're a really quality side. So they're trying to nullify them. And how Unai Emery and Aston Villa try to play, especially out from the back, is they try and bait the press, they try and keep the studs on the ball and try to get an opposition player to encroach them, and then they try and play it from there and exploit the spaces they leave in behind the midfield, and then they go and attack the spaces. I think what's happening now is teams are going, no, we know your quality at that, so when you try and bait the press, we're just not going to do it, and we're going to just sit back a little bit deeper. We're going to try and prevent you passing through the midfield, and I think that's led to Aston Villa not having or creating enough chances, like you said, and therefore they're struggling to score because no teams are willing to give them that space because they know the quality is exploiting them. And I think in terms of the transfer window, over the last couple of years, they lost Leon Bailey, Moussa Diaby, Marcus Rashford, even Jacob Ramsey, who was really good on those wings. And so now they have players who are really good technically, but don't necessarily have that next gear in terms of pace and acceleration. And so therefore you don't have to get as touch tight to them on the wings. And then all of a sudden they're all trying to come inside as well because you've got the likes of McGinn or you've got the likes of Harvey Elliott now. And so they're unable to try and break a team down in the middle, and therefore they're struggling to score the goals because that's where all the opposition players are. Is that something that you've seen as well?
Yeah, I think that's a really really good point in terms of how teams are coming up against Aston Villa, and they're not getting those opportunities in the transition like we saw those long balls over the top for Watkins where he's running on and then holding it up, or Rodgers sort of bursting through that midfield in transition quickly. And a lot of the players in that attacking sense are transitional players. I mean, you look at Tielemans being the one sending those long balls, Rodgers running through, McGinn and Watkins being fantastic runners as well. I just at the moment they are lacking players who fit sort of a system where you're just controlling that ball in that final third. I mean, Ollie Watkins is not a penalty box striker. He's not a traditional number 9. Rodgers isn't that sort of number 10 who's going to sit and wait on the ball. He is a quick thinking, quick running player. And it just doesn't suit them. And like you said, you can tell that it doesn't suit them. Maybe the signing of Harvey Elliott is maybe a little bit more in that sense, somebody who's going to sort of be floating around the edge of the box and can put a good ball in, can play a nice sort of tidy through ball, and is less sort of that transitional player. But at the moment, yeah, I still think they need to readapt. Like you said, how well they play against other teams, exploit their weaknesses and nullify their strengths. I think they need to now find something where they have more of a consistent system going forward, especially as you said with teams sitting back. They need to sort of restructure their attack.
And I don't even think that has to be necessarily long term. They just need to find a different method and then do that for several games in a row. Teams will then adapt to that if Aston Villa are doing it well, and all of a sudden then you'll find the spaces to be able to get through them in field. They'll be there again. So it's just about, in the short term, can you find a different way? I mean, if you can't go through a team, maybe go around. I mean, you might have to sacrifice the defensive quality of Luca Digne and maybe play Ian Maatsen, who, when you do get through that midfield, can then bomb up on the left-hand side. We haven't seen Jadon Sancho yet, if I'm right in saying, so maybe he can do something. You might want to play him perhaps on the right, just to keep that width, and maybe not on the left. I mean, Gasson played, I think it was the Crystal Palace game, but he didn't necessarily have the best game in that one. I think most of his passes were backwards in that one. I think Crystal Palace played that. I mean, I think Unai Emery hasn't beaten Glasgow in like 5 meetings between them as managers, so I think that was just a game that I think Crystal Palace just had their number a little bit. But the thing is, they have good players, they have options, but it's just about, can they do something different now? I mean, even if you don't want to go around a team, can you go over them? Can you just hit it long straight away from the goal kick and get Watkins on the end of something? Maybe you play Morgan Rodgers out on one of those wing positions, because you know when Morgan Rodgers has got space, his quality in dribbling with the ball at his feet is great at taking on a man. Can you actually do that from a wide position and then cut inside rather than starting from the middle as well? So we'll have to see. I think there definitely are options, and it might just be a case of once you score one, you'll score some more.
Yeah, potentially. And I just think in these next 3 games they've got Sunderland away, Fulham at home, and Burnley at home. I think that's going to be 3 further games where they're gonna sit off again. I don't think any of those 3 teams are going to come out with a strong press, taking that bait like you said from Aston Villa, playing it out from the back. And I think it's going to be a potential similar case where Aston Villa are going to have a decent amount of the ball, but are going to struggle to make chances. And you'd hope over sort of the international break and the last game against Everton that maybe they'll have a different method of scoring. I don't know though, because after those 3 games they've then got Spurs and City, so I think they've got to find a solution in those 3 games in a slightly different way of playing. Otherwise, yeah, it could be really really difficult start to the season for them still.
Yeah, but against Spurs and City, I expect them to find it a lot easier, because they won't necessarily sit back and just accept it. Like, Man City will be proactive, will be pressing, and I think Aston Villa could hurt them in transition. I think Spurs might be a bit interesting with Thomas Frank, because he does like to set up his team to nullify the opposition as well. So, especially with the quality of players that Spurs have, if they sit back, then on the counter-attack, they could be deadly. I think there's a situation where perhaps Unai Emery needs to take a little bit more risk in terms of how this team plays. Maybe when they build up, they try and build up with a 3. So maybe you take one of those fullbacks who's sitting in, maybe push them on as well and go, all right, we're going to have two now. We're going to take a little bit of risk. It might not be the perfect patterns of play that I want, but we need to try and get you, the opposition, to do something and maybe think differently. And then, therefore, that might create some space somewhere else in the pitch a little bit higher up for the defenders to create a pass. So I think that's the thing about Unai Emery. I don't doubt his qualities as a manager. It's just now, can you find a different way? Can you adapt? And I think they will. The only issue is from the fixtures they had in the first four games last season, they picked up 10 points. Now they've only got two. That's -8 now from what they got last season. And obviously, football isn't linear. It's not going to be. They're going to win games which they lost last season. So it's all going to even out. But to be only on 2 points after four games is a little bit worrying for a side who just missed out on the Champions League and will probably want to be hoping to get back there again this year.
Yeah, because that's the thing. The first four games they've had hasn't been a difficult run. And when you add on those next three games, you'd think at the start of the season, those first 7 games for Villa, that's come at a great time to sort of maybe build up some momentum, build up some confidence going into those more difficult fixtures against Spurs and City in game week 8 and 9. Whereas, like you said, I think there is a good chance that they will play better against Spurs and City, and I think that game will suit how Aston Villa play when they play well. I'm just concerned that if it gets to the Spurs game and I don't think they're going to get to that Spurs game and still not have scored. But if they've only scored 1 or 2 goals and they're still struggling and they didn't win at least 2 of those games, the confidence is going to be low. They're going to be thinking, shall we stick to this play style still for these next 2 games that hasn't worked for the first 7, even though it's more likely to work in these next 2? Or do they keep with maybe the changes that they have made? It could be a really difficult situation for them to be in. And I think it's less so about them playing in these next 3 games and more so about setting themselves up to sort of carry on and play in the bigger games.
But the good thing is that unlike someone like a Man United, you know the manager, you trust the manager's got credit in the bank. So it is going to be about how can Unai Emery go about trying to adapt and fix this Aston Villa side rather than do we need to be considered sacking Unai Emery because we know he's a quality manager. Ultimately, it's my fault because I've got Ollie Watkins in my FPL team. That's why he's not scoring any goals so far. Move on then to our third team, Wolverhampton Wanderers, who are rock bottom of the Premier League, 1 place below Aston Villa. 0 points, 0 wins, 0 draws, 4 losses. Only 2 goals scored, 9 conceded. And I want to start this off by saying we will obviously talk about the football on the pitch because the players and the manager are the ones who are forward facing. They're the ones who you see on a weekly basis. But I have seen a lot of criticism for the executive chairman, Jeff Shee, and also the Fosun, who's the investment group that own Wolverhampton Wanderers. And I think it's completely justified because of the fact that for the last 5 years, Wolverhampton Wanderers have just sold all of their best players and they've always struggled to replace them with quality replacements. And if they do replace them, then it's late on in the window and they're not necessarily as good, but then if they are, you have to wait for them to get that good, and that doesn't necessarily help the manager in charge at the moment. So I can understand why a lot of Wolverhampton Wanderers fans are annoyed at the moment. I was also thinking for myself, this is just what Wolves do. They sell their best players, don't necessarily reinvest, and they keep the profits, which is incredibly frustrating if you're a Wolves fan. But we will talk about the football, because that's what, we claim to know most. So in terms of Victor Pereira and his side, what can he do at the moment? What's been going wrong? Where do you want to start, mate?
Yeah, I actually want to start with some talk of the players, like you said, that links into sort of comparing them to last season, how they've performed this season. I mean, when you look at their top 6 players in terms of combined goals and assists last season, 5 of them haven't been there in the last 2 games for Wolves. I mean, you're looking at Cunha, who had 21, he was sold. Strand Larsen on 18 is currently injured, and they actually decided to keep him and reject Newcastle's proposal. But yeah, he's out at the moment. How long is he going to be out for? Nuri was actually their 3rd top combined goal and assist with 11, obviously sold to Manchester City. And then in 5th and 6th place, you had Guedes and Sarabia, both who are no longer at Wolves. So their only player at the moment who is available and in the squad is Bellegarde, who had 9 goals and assists last season and didn't even start on the weekend, is not a starter for Wolves. So it really feels like the main thing for Wolves is just that quality of their squad has dropped massively compared to last season. I think the loss of Cunha and Ait Nouri cannot be understated. They were easily the most influential players for Wolves. It doesn't feel like there's any players who are stepping up in their absence, and it's almost like the whole team is looking, where do we go now? How do we get those moments of quality that are going to win us games? Because it doesn't feel at the moment like the players are there to do it, unfortunately.
Yeah, I remember looking back over the last couple of years, and there's a pattern emerging, and I think Wolves fans know about this, that Lopetegui was there, and then he didn't get investment, so he left before he really had a chance to fail with that squad. So then in comes Gary O'Neill at the last minute. He then does well, and then next season he doesn't get the investment. He then leaves. Vitor Pereira comes in, does well. Now he didn't necessarily have the investment, and now he's struggling with this Wolves squad. And it's a pattern that just rinse and repeat year after year. And I can understand why Wolves fans are so frustrated. But in terms of what they can actually do, if Wolves are going to stay in the league this year, because the newly promoted sides have upped the game, so then it's not going to be any pushovers. They're going to have to really work for this. They need to keep Strand Larsen fit. At the moment, he's got Achilles tendon issues, and I was trying to find out how long he's going to be out for. I think the official statement is they're going to take it day by day and see how he does. I heard some rumours, and this might just be because Wolves are just like really got everything crossed to hope that he's back fit as soon as possible. I did hear some rumours that maybe he's going to be out longer than expected. If that is going to be a huge blow. So hopefully for Wolves' sake, he can be back soon. Obviously, they've got the new signing Tolu Arakadore. I hope I'm saying that right. He scored 21 goals in the Belgian League for Genk. And Wolves are a side who actually have put in the most open play crosses in the Premier League, joint, I think, with Manchester United on 18. So having him, I don't know his exact height, he looks at least 6'3", probably taller than that. I just don't want to overplay it. And if they can get him firing in the absence of Strand Larsen, but then when Strand Larsen comes in, maybe both of them together, maybe just one of them and one off the bench, they're going to need them to score the goals they need because, like you said, Tobes, they've lost so much attacking firepower that it's going to be crucial that they get the goals for Wolves because I don't see many coming from many other places in the side.
Yeah, and it still feels like the system is very similar, as you said, in terms of that three at the back with the wing backs who are getting those crosses in early, spamming those crosses in nice and early for the strikers. So no changes there. Again, it feels like any sort of structural changes is that going to be much different for Wolves at the moment. Going forward, I don't think so, and I think they are probably doing what they can and what they know best at the moment. But in terms of defensively, they also seem to be struggling at the back. It's not just going forward, which for me this season was actually quite surprising for Wolves, because I think the quality in their defence probably at the moment is better than the rest of their team. I mean, they've got some great midfielders, and I love Andre. I think he is their best player by far, who is available at the moment. But regardless, I think their defence has some good quality and probably should be performing a little bit better than it is. I mean, three goals conceded to Everton in game week 3, as good as Everton maybe at times have been going forward. I think that was quite a surprise given when you look at Wolves' defensive lineup, how I think they do balance that attack and defence quite well in terms of their wing backs. Is another area where maybe there needs to be some tweaks and they need to improve.
They absolutely have the personnel, don't they? I mean, I'm looking at the lineup now. I mean, Johnson was playing against Newcastle because Sarr, I think, had an illness. But in the back three of Gomez, Mosquera, Agbadou, that was a back three last season that did really well for Wolves. And you look at them going, God, these three centre-backs are solid. They've got a mixture of pace, quality, physicality, and as a 3 rather than a 2, they're going to be really difficult to get past. And now they've just been leaking like a sieve. I don't know quite what's going on. Maybe it's the fact that they're under constant pressure and therefore they're not getting the chance to get a rest in the game. But I do agree. I think they are struggling massively defensively. I mean, I do like the fact that Rodrigo Gomez, I think he started the season quite well and arguably has been their best player in the first 4 games, which isn't difficult, but he could have scored in the first minute against Newcastle. I think he did score a goal in the Everton game as well. So he looks promising. However, promising isn't good enough to get you points and goals, and that's more than anything the Wolves needs. And I thought it was quite interesting, Vitor Pereira, how he sounded in his post-Newcastle interview, where he was talking about, we know what we have to do, we know where we have to improve, we just need to be given the time to do it. And I almost wonder if he was signaling to higher up than him in the club, like, we can get through this, just give me time to adapt these players, which, by the way, you recruited so late on in the transfer window. So how are we going to go about fixing Wolves apart from just Strand Larsen staying fit? Because that feels like a little bit of a Hail Mary at the moment.
Yeah, that's the thing with Wolves as well. Like you say, he needs time to sort of fix things, and I think he's quite clear in saying that. But with the sort of newly promoted sides, especially having fairly decent starts to the season, is how much time is he going to be given? How much longer can it go on with Wolves staying bottom of the league and maybe teams ahead of them getting further ahead? It's difficult, and that pressure certainly this year feels on a lot earlier with those maybe other relegation candidates performing fairly decently, maybe better compared to expectations. One quick fix for me, which, and I don't like saying this and blaming one player, and I know, like you said, he wasn't even playing in the last game, is Jose Sarr. And I think he is a player that has been long overdue to be replaced in that Wolves side. Statistically, he's been really poor for the last 2 or 3 seasons, and this season it has carried on as well. Minus 1.5 post-shot expected goals, which puts him 19th in the league for starting goalkeepers, and 43% save percentage, which again is 19th in the league. Maybe a small tweak like that, like playing Johnston, like you said, who I think is probably a better goalkeeper, could help them defensively, and maybe those minor tweaks might help them get a few points over the whole course of the season, which, as it looks at the moment, if they're in a relegation race, could make a difference. But I certainly don't want to completely blame Jose Sarr, and there are defensive structural issues as well. But yeah, for me, he has been poor again this season.
I can't remember when Wolves signed Sam Johnston. Maybe it was last year, maybe it was 2 years ago. I can't quite remember, but he was signed definitely after Jose Sarr was at the club. I remember Johnston coming in and getting the number 1 shirt, but then he was so poor that Sarr actually came back into the side. So I really think with all of this, I think the players have to take some accountability as well, because are they performing to their maximum level? I don't think they are. Even when you're doing really badly, are you working as hard? I think they're working fairly hard. I don't think you can criticize them for that. But are they producing their best quality? And I don't think they are. Could they do better than 2 goals so far? Yeah. Could they have conceded less than 9 goals? Again, yeah. So I think as much as Wolves are a mess, and maybe you're missing your best players, and maybe you sold your best players, I think that squad is capable of doing better than they have done so far, and they need to take some accountability as well, the players themselves. Should we move on then to, well, I don't know who you want to move on to then. We didn't actually do this in the running order. Should we go to Leeds United next? Is that okay with you?
Yeah, let's move on to Leeds. I feel like they're sort of the next clear candidate where it's quite easy to see that there are some issues with Leeds at the moment. Just to touch on maybe the positives first, I think defensively they have been, for me, surprisingly, really, really good. I mean, they were 2 minutes away at the weekend from having three clean sheets out of their first 4 games, which was especially painful for me, given I had Goodmanson transferred into my FPL team, who just decided to take himself from a clean sheet all the way down to a 0-point own goal. And besides the Arsenal game, which they lost 5-0, in those 3 games, no team has produced an XG of more than 0.85. So it's not even like they're getting lucky or relying on their goalkeeper in terms of keeping those clean sheets. They have just been defensively really, really good, which is a great sort of basis to build on. But then when we look at the other end of the pitch, it's, only 1 goal, which was a penalty, is a big red flag so far.
And that's the thing, they need to try and find that balance of trying to maintain their solid defence, but also go the other end and score a few more goals, because 1 goal, and that being from a penalty, in the Premier League, I think there's a stat about you need to score at least, I think a point, every point is worth at least 1 goal, so you need to score about 40 to get roughly 40 points. It's not an exact science, but it's the closest we got at the moment. And so at this rate, I mean, they're going to fall well short of that, aren't they? And the defence, while looking really resolute, hasn't done the business, you got to say, because of the fact that, they conceded against Fulham, and maybe after that we go, well, they're starting with defence and maybe going forward, but ultimately it was really unlucky, but they didn't get the points in the end and they got none from it. So we'll have to wait and see. In terms of the attack, I saw they've only had 7 shots on target in 4 games. That is simply not enough. And also the fact that the average shot distance for Leeds, I think, is the 4th or 5th lowest in the league in terms of distance away from the goal, which is 18.1. So on average, Leeds United are having a shot, but it's from outside the penalty area, and they need to get more in the penalty area to increase their chances of scoring those goals. And especially considering they started with Calvert-Lewin in the last game against Fulham, and he's a striker who last season only scored 3 goals from an XG of 6.7. So not creating enough chances, not creating enough quality chances, and then having strikers up front who are notorious for underperforming their XG. It's a recipe for disaster so far. What I would say is, I think Leeds do have exciting wide players in the likes of Nonto and Okafor, and Brendan Harrison, maybe if he was to play in a 10 position rather than out wide. But they are exciting, but are they going to produce the attack and returns that Leeds United need? That's the only thing, and I'm just not sure it's an issue that they can change massively in their favour without a transfer window, and the transfer window just closed.
Yeah, it is a bit of an unfortunate meme, isn't it, that the team who are struggling to score and underperforming their XG have Calvert-Lewin as their sort of new starting striker, you would think. And yeah, I think a lot of the other forward players, especially on the wing and the midfield behind them, I don't think, again, they have any natural goal scorers. They have some really good creative players who are going to be looking to those forwards to be the ones to score. I don't see any clinical players in that side yet. Calvert-Lewin is just been season after season of, if you can get him playing well, he does do a lot really well. His hold-up play is fantastic. His link-up play with wingers is fantastic. And I think maybe if you had forwards who were maybe more direct in terms of going towards the goal, I think their wingers are very good at going down the line and getting the ball into the box. Whereas maybe if you had wingers who are more direct going for the goal themselves, Calvert-Lewin would be a great option, especially for Leeds, who are a bit more conservative, sitting back, looking for longer balls. Some of the time, Calvert-Lewin can be that man to hold it up, get those quick transitions and get those wingers in behind to score. Whereas the way that maybe the wingers are playing, it's looking for Calvert-Lewin to score, which is not his strongest point as a striker, ironically. So I'm not really sure what a fix would be for them. I mean, going forward, what tweaks, if any, have you seen that maybe would help them score a few more goals in the games coming?
That's a really difficult one, because I don't think I've seen differences in the way they've attacked tactically, apart from personnel changes and just those wingers or strikers just being different in what their game is. I think maybe they need to put the ball into the box a lot more. I think they struggle to get the ball from back to front quickly enough to then get their forwards in a position where the defenders aren't necessarily right on them, because they want to go forward and attack really well, but they struggle to do it with pace, and therefore they just get bogged down, and then they have decent possession, but that doesn't necessarily lead to them creating any chances from it. I think be a lot quicker, take more risks, and get the ball into the box a lot more. It sounds so simple, and that is such basic analysis, and I sound like Roy Keane, just get the ball in the box. That's your job. But I think that would work, and I think maybe if Dominic Calvert-Lewin, or if it's Felix Nemecha, or sorry, not Felix, Lucas Nemecha, and if it's like Okafor, Dan James, they're not the most clinical. So I say just get the ball into the box, create a huge amount of XG, and create a huge amount of shots that you have to score from, and then just could stay really tight at the back. But it sounds very hit and hope, doesn't it? Rather than this is something that I can see fixing. I'm going to have to see a lot more of them, because I didn't see too much of them in the Championship. And I've watched the game so far, but I just don't see anything tactically at the moment that Daniel Farke could do differently without different personnel at his disposal.
Yeah, it's just as simple as put the ball in the back of the net. Come on, it's easy. It's easy. I just wanted to actually move on to our next team, one that we have got mentioned in Nottingham Forest, because I think what you're saying in terms of maybe Leeds being a little bit more direct, creating a few more chances, and maybe taking more risks, I think is something that we are going to see from Nottingham Forest coming forward in the next weeks now that Ange Postecoglou is their new manager. Um, and I think having them in this episode is less so saying that they have been really poor or that there are glaring issues. It has been maybe a little bit of a disappointment for Forest with only 4 points from 4 games so far, considering how well they were last season. But I think having them in here is maybe to see how they are going to be going forward. Are they going to be changing things drastically under Postecoglou and taking those more risks, like we say? Is it going to fix potential issues? Is it going to create more issues? And it feels like a situation with Forest where it's a bit in... we're in a bit of a no man's land with them, and we don't know which way they're going to be going. And I don't think the Arsenal game on the weekend was any indication of maybe how they're going to play going forward either.
No, absolutely not. I think I said it on last week's episode, but I think that was the perfect game for them because of the fact that how else should you play if you're an underdog going to the Emirates against this Arsenal side who are quality other than park the bus, get something on the counter attack? So I think we'll see definitely over the coming weeks how it's going to go. I also think with Europe and having games every 3 days, that Portugal is going to really get to know his squad and his players really well, and he's going to find out about their strengths, their weaknesses, and how which of the players are going to be able to play in the way that he wants them to play. Um, and I think it's going to be interesting because Forest are a very aggressive club who, rather than wait the season to see if Nuno can play more attacking football, they're just going to cut that out. Say you're not good enough to take us to the next level, so we're going to bring on someone who does, ignoring everything that happened probably behind the scenes as well. And so I think the squad is capable of playing a more attractive style of football. I think Zinchenko as a signing makes a lot more sense for Postecoglou than it did for Nuno. Douglas Luiz as a midfielder makes a lot more sense for Ange Postecoglou than Nuno. And I think that the squad has some really great quality players. Dan Doy did start the first 2 games, hit the ground running. Now it's all kind of slowed down and the malaise of what's going on. But they still have a solid defence. They still have players who can hurt you in attack. And I think they have enough to be good and to have a good season. I just don't know what that looks like if you're basing it on the ambitions of Marinakis, because I don't know what's going on inside his head.
Yeah, for me, I think this is kind of West Ham and David Moyes round two. I think when like what you're saying in terms of playing more attractive attacking football, I think the football Nottingham Forest played last year was great, and I loved watching it. I think their defensively is their strength. Their defense is superb, and there is a lot to build that for Nottingham Forest. And I think their back five were all superb, and I think all of them were sort of the team of the season contenders. They were that good. And when they transitioned and broke and attacked, you had Elanga and Hudson-Odoi and Gibbs-White and Anderson bursting forward and playing so well, and it was really great. And just because it's not high possession and high control doesn't mean it's not good football. And I think that's exactly what we had with West Ham under David Moyes, where they sat back and they broke quickly, and it was still good to watch. And just because maybe seems like other teams have more of the ball, it's not as good. And I think this is again going to be the case with Nottingham Forest, where maybe now they've gone to Ange, they're going to lose what they have been so good at in terms of their defence. And I think if there's too many system and structural changes, there's going to be a lot of people looking back like, why did Nuno go? And I think a lot of it is going to be down to those behind the scenes things, like you say, because I really don't understand it otherwise, and I really don't like the maybe the narrative that, whether it's Nottingham Forest fans or the media or Marinakis making the changes to play more better attacking football, because the way that they played last year got Nottingham Forest into Europe, which is insane. So I'm not going to be positive for Ange coming in, and I'm a little bit worried for Nottingham Forest if I'm being honest. Especially, they haven't started the season great, but they haven't been bad. And I think in those first two games, they were still pretty decent. It's just been these last two 3-0 losses in a row. But yeah, I don't know. I'm just rambling now because I don't like it. I don't like it. I like defensive football can be good to watch, and it can be attacking when it needs to be.
And it's funny because it's probably that way of playing that Nuno did last year with this Forest side that'd probably be perfect for them in the Europa League, coming against the size that they are and coming against the quality of opposition that they might do in the latter stages, which you'd think would suit them well. We'll have to wait and see. I think, it could very well be another 17th place and a Europa League for Ange Postecoglou, or it could be top table. We just don't know. But what I would say is I think he'd be smart to make the adjustment slowly and over a longer period of time, so that come the end of the season we'll be going, wow, this Forest side are really good, rather than going 0 to 100 right now, because I think otherwise they might be in a bit of trouble, and I think then we would see a scenario where they are struggling massively. I think the whole thing just feels at the moment a little bit soulless, because you're not giving someone credit for the good job they did by keeping them on, giving them a new contract, letting them see how they can do in the new season. It just feels like you're pulling the rug under someone before they even have a chance to show you what they're capable of doing. And it's that what if, where I think a lot of us are going, well, what if Nuno did improve his style's quality of football? And what if they did go forward and be better? We'll never know now, will we? And then the final team, West Ham United, talking about like you were with David Moyes and Graham Potter, a side who lost 3-0 against Spurs on the weekend, a derby. But I'll be honest, I think up until the Suchet red card, I think West Ham were playing okay. Not necessarily brilliantly, because I think Spurs were the better side. But anytime they went forward with the ball, I thought they were doing quite well, creating some chances. And they did have a couple of chances, Paqueta just wide away from the post. And I think it's one where you can play devil's advocate. Just, they played just well for 10 minutes against Nottingham Forest where they got 3 goals. And it is worrying. But I still think they have enough. So why have we put West Ham here? Is it just because of the fact that they're not necessarily doing well in terms of points and the results don't show it at the moment?
Yeah, and I think when you've got to look at least at some of those performances, I mean, the 5-1 loss to Chelsea sort of stands out. They do have the worst defence in the league. They have conceded 11 goals in 4 games, which is far too many. And so far for West Ham, it has been poor. I mean, like you said, without that 3-0 win against Forest, which was great, with those goals coming in the last 10 minutes, where would they be? But I think a positive for West Ham sort of going forward is that they are seeming to try and fix those errors and try and fix them quickly. They've very quickly changed into a back 4 where they have looked much better, against Forest. I think they did look better against Spurs, as you said, especially up to that Souček red card, which I think it was almost game over at that point, with the way that Spurs have been playing especially. Yeah, I think West Ham do have to be in there based in where they are in the league and how they have been playing. But I don't think it's all going to be doom and gloom. And I think, like you said, with players like Paqueta and Bowen going forward, and they do have a really quality squad still, that they will be able to turn it around. And their next 5 games are pretty decent if you avoid their away game at Arsenal. I mean, you've got Palace, Everton, Brentford and Leeds in the next 5, where I think they will be better than they have been so far. And it seems that they're slowly moving into the right direction, and we probably should see them getting a few more points than they have so far.
And if you also include the 2 games after the Leeds one, they've got Newcastle and Burnley. So, Newcastle is a tough game, but it'll be with Newcastle who've got Champions League football, so who knows how they're going to be on the weekend. So yeah, they do have those fixtures. I think it might be just a case of they're just going to be just above the relegation zone, flirting with it throughout the entire season, but ultimately being fine. And you'll probably be worried about, oh God, we better get 3 points soon. And then they do, and then you're like, okay, it's cool. And then they lose the next 2 games. And that might just be West Ham for the entirety of the season. I think they are transitioning okay-ish into a new squad, a ball-playing squad, one that can suit Graham Potter better than it David Moyes. But I still think it's going to take them some time. And obviously, with Souček picking up a red card, that's not ideal. Obviously, it was a red card, but it was unfortunate because he went into it with no malice. but him being out for 3 games is going to be cause a bit of an issue now. And then they also pick up a couple of injuries here and there. Is it going to be Paqueta in the 9? Is it going to be Fulkrug? Is it going to be Wilson? Hopefully you want Paqueta a little bit further behind, but when he does play this false 9, it links up the play really well, but they're not necessarily clinical, and then you can throw the argument of they're not playing a striker. I think they are side going towards that improved style of football that West Ham fans want, but I think it is going to be at the expense of the results, and hopefully it's not going to be at the expense of too many points, because then you're going to be in a struggle for relegation. But it might just be a case of, well, we're going to be 16th this season, but the hope is hopefully next season you're going to be like top 10. But we'll have to wait and see, because Graham Potter's first going to get results to make sure he gets there next season.
Yeah, and there's certainly, like I think we've said with all of these teams, it has only been 4 games. In 10 games times, things could completely change. One of these teams could go on a run, could pick up a lot more form. And I think with a lot of what we've said, maybe there wouldn't be a surprise, especially with the way the league has been this season. It feels very, very open. It doesn't feel like there's teams where we think, oh, they're stuck, they're going to be down there all season. It feels like there's opportunity for all these teams to turn it around. And hopefully they do. And hopefully we do see teams going up and down, and it's not as maybe predictable, especially in terms of relegation and these teams who have been struggling, as it has been in the last few years. So, yeah, still a lot to play for sure.